Hello, this is Mr. Bakri from Toronto International Academy and StudyNow.ca, and today we are going to be talking about Othello by William Shakespeare. This video is an introduction to the play and an introduction to the historical background that led to the play being written. So first of all, the play Othello was written by William Shakespeare around 1603. William Shakespeare is perhaps the most famous playwright in the English language, perhaps even in the world. He wrote hundreds of poems and many different plays. Now keep in mind that this is a play, so those of you who are reading Othello, remember that this is not just a novel. Okay, this is meant to be acted. It is meant to be spoken. It is meant to be presented on a stage, in a theater. And that's exactly what happened for many centuries, and you can still watch Othello in some theaters today. Othello was, or rather, William Shakespeare was someone that was very well known for writing very nuanced characters, meaning his characters were not fully good or fully evil, they were not melodramatic, they were generally a nice balance of black, white, and gray. They had good qualities, they had evil qualities, they had strengths, they had weaknesses, they had motivations, they had jealousy, suspicion, love, loyalty, betrayal, revenge, mercy, etc. These were very complex characters, and that's what makes Shakespeare's plays so timeless and so relevant for people at high school age and older. Because this is not just a play about good versus evil. This is a play about the complexities of life and personalities. So first, in order to understand why the play was written, we have to understand 16th century politics. So in the 1500s, between 1585 and 1604, England was at war with Spain. Okay, so there was the very famous Spanish Armada, which was the largest naval fleet of the time in that period, and it was a fleet that consisted of 130 ships, okay, and over 20,000 Spanish soldiers on this fleet. And this was supposed to be an overthrow of Queen Elizabeth I in England, who was a Protestant, and this was supposed to be a very decisive attack. Now, the Spanish Armada started right over here, and then it went all the way up to England, and as you can see, not only was there a battle in which they were decisively defeated by the English by surprise, nobody expected this at the time, but the Spanish Armada also suffered a series of storms. And between the battles and the storms, this Spanish Armada, these 130 ships, completely failed. 20,000 Spanish soldiers were killed, and sailors were killed, and this was seen as a huge victory for England and Protestantism, because they saw the storms as the wind of God destroying his enemies, in this case the Spanish Catholics. Now, of course, this struck an unlikely alliance at the time. There's a saying in English, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay? Now, who was the main enemy of the Spanish in Spain? The main enemy were the Moors. The Moors were people from northwest Africa. Till today, you have a country called Morocco. You have a country called Mauritania, okay, coming from that word Moor. And the Moors were people that invaded Spain in 711, okay, CE, and they had taken over Spain, Portugal, what's called the Iberian Peninsula, Granada, and they were in charge of a civilization called Andalusia. This lasted between the years 711 until 1492. Gradually, from the 11th century onward, the Moors were kicked out of more and more of Europe and the Iberian Peninsula and Spain. And eventually, by 1492, you have what's called the Spanish Inquisition, or the Reconquista. And this was when the Spanish Catholics were able to root out the Moorish Arab Muslims from Europe for good. And in 1492, of course, the Moors receded back into northwest Africa. Now, of course, Morocco is a kingdom that continues till this day, and they had their, you know, their intention on fighting against the Spanish even after 1492. And so that brings us to the next piece. Of course, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Here you have the English who were fighting against the Spanish, and you have the Moors in northwest Africa fighting against the Spanish. And so, in 1600, the year 1600, there was an attempt at an alliance between the Moors and the English. Over here on the left, you have Abdul Wahid bin Mas'ud, and over here on the right, you have Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I of England. Abdul Wahid bin Mas'ud was the ambassador, okay, sent from Morocco to England in order to try to strike up an alliance so that the English and the Moroccans together could prepare a fleet to invade Spain and become allies. Now, this would have been a very unlikely alliance because, as you could see, Europe was over here, Africa was over here, they have very different cultures, they had different religions, but what they had in common was a common enemy. And so Abdul Wahid was invited to be a guest of the state in London, in England, and he brought with him an interpreter. Abdul Wahid spoke to the interpreter in Italian, and the Italian interpreter spoke to Queen Elizabeth's interpreter, and they were able to translate that into English. And so there was an attempt for 6 months to create an alliance, and that alliance never ended up materializing or amounting to anything. They never ended up joining forces on a military level and invading Spain, but they did end up having some trade agreements and some other friendly relations. Now, of course, this was at a time in history when it was very rare for people to travel across different continents. Okay? Just the mere presence of a Moorish, Arab, Muslim from Africa in England, that's something that would have taken England by storm. Okay? That would have been something very significant because the people in England would have never met anyone from Morocco in their life. Someone that speaks a different language, dresses differently, looks different from how they look and appear. Okay, generally, people in Africa, people from Morocco, perhaps they have darker skin, darker features. This was something that would have been a very unique event, okay, before the invention of airplanes and telephones and video conferencing and the internet. So this was a very significant visit. And one of the places that our friend, the ambassador of Morocco, Abdul Wahid bin Mas'ud, visited was, of course, the Globe Theatre. The Globe Theatre was Shakespeare's personal theatre, where he actually had the Shakespearean plays played out. And this is in London. It's still there today. If you visit London, you can actually go to the Globe Theatre. And this is one of the places that Abdul Wahid visited. Now, we don't know for sure if he met Shakespeare, but it seemed to have been very, very likely. And what appears is that the main character of Othello, okay, may have actually been based on Abdul Wahid, okay, because the main character of Othello is a Moor. This is him on the left, played in a movie in the 90s by Lawrence Fishburne. And it's very likely that this meeting or this potential meeting inspired this play because the main character in Shakespeare is a Moor. And this is a very unique thing for the 1600s because the English were mainly concerned with Europe. They were more writing about England and Denmark and Germany and Norway. They were not really writing about a main character who was of African descent. So racism plays a very big role in Shakespeare's Othello. The main character, of course, the Othello as a play takes place in Venice. It takes place in Venice, which is a city in Italy. And Othello as a Moor is actually a convert to Christianity. So he's someone that is a general in the Italian Venetian army. He's loyal to the Venetian duke, and he himself is a convert to Christianity, and he becomes a general in the army. So he's someone that, although ethnically, racially, is a Moor coming from Morocco, coming from Africa, again, a Muslim country, an Arabic-speaking country, he's someone that embraces Christianity, speaks Italian, and is honored in his society. The main enemy, okay, of Othello in this play is the man on the right named Iago. Iago, okay, Othello is an Arabic name from the word Attallah. Iago is a Spanish name, okay, and what's perhaps possible is that Shakespeare named Iago after Santiago Matamoros. The patron saint of the Spanish Inquisition was Saint Iago Matamoros, which in Spanish means the Moor killer. Okay, Saint Iago the Moor killer. And this is because in the 15th century, Santiago Matamoros finished off the Moors in Spain, and he became the patron saint of the Inquisition. Now, it is interesting that even though the play takes place in Italy, you have an Arabic name for the main character, and you have a Spanish name for the adversary or the rival or the enemy of the main character, Iago. And Iago, in fact, is trying to lead to Othello's demise. He is someone that is trying to destroy Othello. He is trying to see Othello dead. So it is a very apt name, and it's interesting considering in the West, generally, there is an antagonism more towards people like Othello than people like Iago. But at the time of Shakespeare, one needs to understand that since Spain was the main enemy of England, what Othello may be communicating in this play is that that Spain remains an enemy, and that Spain can get in between Othello or the Moors and the rest of the characters in the play. So this is just some significant historical background that is worth mentioning before jumping into the play, because when we understand this history, we can understand some of the racism that Othello receives in the play. He's often referred to as the Moor. He's referred to as lascivious, which means that he is someone that is very sexual or sexually charged. He's someone that's seen as full of trickery and charms and spells, which is a stereotype, okay, against the Moroccans. Till this day, there is a reputation for being fortune tellers and witches and people with black magic. So these are racist tropes or racist stereotypes that appear against Othello as a character in the play Othello. So, I hope you learned a lot from this, and we will be covering the rest of the story and its themes in the coming videos. Thank you very much.